Governance and Standards Committee. Before we start the meeting, I have a few housekeeping announcements to make. Members of the public are welcome to film, audio record, photograph, or tweet the public proceedings of the meeting. I'd ask anyone in the room to please be considerate towards other people and take care not to disturb the proceedings. I'm going to start by asking whether we have received any apologies for the meeting.
We've received apologies from Councillor James Moyes, who has requested that Councillor Renata Hambas sit as reserve, and we've received apologies from Angela Mason-Bell, the internal auditor from BDO.
Thank you. As this is our first meeting, I'm going to take the opportunity to ask everyone to introduce themselves, and I'll start. I'm Colin Boyle. I am a councillor for Rotherhithe Ward, and I am the chair of the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee, and we'll work round.
Virginia Wynne-Jones, clerk to the committee.
Felix Hamer, councillor for Chaucer Ward.
Richard Macmillan, councillor for Surrey Docks Ward.
Councillor Graham Nelson, George's Ward.
Councillor Renata Hambas, Peckham Rye Ward.
Councillor Esme Dobson, Rye Lane Ward.
Councillor John Batterson, Newington.
Good evening, everybody. John Scarborough, Interim Director of Law and Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Hello, Clive Pelferman, Strategic Director of Resources.
Thanks, everyone. We will just formally confirm that all the councillors present are voting members of the committee.
Would you mind doing this by show of hands? Thank you very much.
Right, the next item on the agenda is the notification of any items of business which the chair deems urgent. I'm happy to confirm that there are no urgent items of business for this meeting. Next, we have a disclosure of members' interests and dispensations. Does any member wish to declare any interest or dispensation in respect of any item or issue to be considered at this meeting? Thank you. I will take that as nothing to declare. We're on to agenda number item 5, the minutes, pages 1 to 6 of the agenda. Could members please approve the minutes of the meeting held on 3rd February 2026?
It's how I remember it. I don't think anybody else here was there.
Sure.
Well, if it helps give members some assurance, obviously we were there as an officer team. I recognise this is a new committee starting the new administration. From my recollection of the meeting, the minutes reflect the discussions that we had.
Thank you. I will therefore take the minutes as approved. Okay. Agenda item 6. We're here to Corporate Anti-Fraud Team and Special Investigations Team Year-End Report 2025-26. So we will now consider the item, and I'll invite Paul to present.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Paul Rock, Head of Internal Audit and covering the counter-fraud role on an interim basis. So the report presented to you this evening provides the year-end position for the Corporate Anti-Fraud Team and the Specialist Investigation Team. It sets out the activity delivered over the year, the outcomes achieved and the contributions made. The report highlights the volumes of work and type of work undertaking, such as the investigations and proactive work that's been performed by the team, and it demonstrates the outcomes that have been achieved over the course of the year in terms of financial impact and wider benefits such as deterrence. I'd offer that overall the report provides assurance to the committee that the council has active and effective counter-fraud arrangements in place. While there are always areas for improvement and something that we'll always continually seek to improve as a council, I'm content that the work that's being presented to you is of good standard and provides you with assurance. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions the committee might have.
Thanks for that. Do members have any questions for the officers?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I noticed in paragraph 24 speaks about the increase in the value of fraud identified being around £500,000 more than the previous year. But then I think the size of the team has kind of steadily decreased over the last couple of years. So I just kind of wondered what impact you think that has in terms of reduced resource, in terms of identifying the level of fraud that is taking place out there.
Certainly. So the value of the fraud will be impacted by the type and nature of the cases that are investigated, which is hard to predict from year to year. In some years you'll get a high volume of low value cases that can take a lot of time to investigate but don't yield a great deal of financial loss or hopefully recovery, and then you can have one case that could be worth £2 million and it takes up the team's resources over the course of the year. So value is often driven by the nature and type of cases received. In terms of reducing resources, the level of fraud being detected is still good because while we might have less staff, over the course of many years the level of detection has improved as a result of things like the National Fraud Initiative, the London Fraud Hub, which is local authorities across London joining together to try and find fraud. Some organisations use a system called CIFAS, which helps detect recruitment fraud. So overall we can still achieve a good level of detection with reduced resources. Having said that, from having just taken over, if there's opportunity for more resources to counter fraud, I'd always leap at that opportunity. But at the same time, I realise we have to manage within the budgets that we have, and at the moment, I'm content that we've got the right resources to deliver what we need to. And there are opportunities going forward, perhaps to enter into a shared service. I'm the head of internal audit for Lambeth and Southwark, but I also lead a shared service for Lambeth and Croydon on fraud. So there are lots of opportunities for us to explore as neighbouring boroughs to maximise the use of the resources we have collectively.
Thank you, Chair. From previous meetings, you'll remember that I've asked about right to buy and fraudulent applications for right to buy. I think we spoke about liaising with other councils, working with other councils both within London and further abroad. I wonder also, has there been any criminal prosecutions for any applications which have been denied or found to have been irregular? Thank you, Chair.
I'm not aware of any prosecutions in the right to buy space. In my experience, right to buy application fraud is typically resolved by preventing the application from proceeding and essentially saving the council money from offering a large discount. And it's not often prosecuted because it becomes potentially an attempted fraud rather than a fully successful fraud. That's not to say that each case isn't considered on its own merits, but it's not a common one that's prosecuted. I'd have to look. I'm happy to take away a question to examine, local neighbouring boroughs as to whether we've prosecuted right to buy fraud. I can speak from Lambeth's perspective that we haven't, but that's not to say that we wouldn't, given the right opportunities. So.
Chair, could I express concern? I think maybe it's widely shared that that there are no prosecutions for irregular applications. Either an application is bona fide, in which case we go ahead with it, or there's a reason why it doesn't. And if there's a criminal reason, then I would expect the council or the local authority to go to the police with potentially with fraudulent application.
Thank you for that. Is there a specific action or response back you would like from the team?
I'm just concerned that that it seems to be a how can I put this, that it would be easy to attempt this, and if it fails, there's no sort of retribution. There's no downside for it. So it's like a open. It's like an easy what's the expression I'm looking for here? Thank you. Yeah, you either get your discount or you don't get your discount, but there's no downside to it. Thank you.
Do you wish to respond?
Certainly, I think what I'll propose is I'll come back next time with a bit more detail around the types of right to buy application fraud that we've detected, what action we've taken, and if I can, why we haven't proceeded with any further action. And that might give better detail for for me to answer your question. I will say that in every prosecution we have to apply the Crown prosecution test, so it has to be within the public interest and there has to be sufficient evidence, and all those factors have to be taken into account when we're deciding whether to prosecute as a council or not. But I will happily come back with a bit more detail for you next time.
Thank you for that. I would like to pick up on kind of tenancy fraud specifically. I believe that's covered by the Special Investigations team. To what extent has there, or when was there last a kind of major kind of, effort to investigate that over and above kind of just the general level that you're currently doing?
From memory, we have run operations in the past, so deliberate, kind of wide-ranging, focused operations on tenancy fraud. I can't put a date on it. There will be officers in the council who would be able to respond with a specific. I can recall we had Operation Silver at one point, certainly was undertaken to that effect. Some councillors may recall, but we can get back to you with specifics of the last time that occurred.
If councillors suspect tenancy fraud, what's the best way for us to report it?
Welcome to contact me or any member of the team, and we'll happily take that information and investigate for you.
So I think I would like, the Special Investigation team specifically to kind of come back to the next meeting to give us a really full briefing on tenancy fraud and the overall strategy and approach and governance and the risks around that. Thank you. Do councillors have any? Yep, Richard.
I'd just like to ask, it says in here you're sort of preventing around £2.2 million worth of fraud, and I'm guessing there's a mix of tactics, legal, various other routes. What's your sort of overall costs of detection versus what you're recovering?
So the cost of detection will primarily be the team costs, as it were, the employee costs. I don't have that figure to hand, but I can certainly provide it to you separately. On top of that, there might be some ancillary costs, for example, subscriptions to the National Fraud Initiative and similar, but predominantly it's team costs in terms of detection.
Yes, I've just my colleagues just pointed me to sort of the average cost per investigation, but it would be good to get a sense of what the overall costs are versus what you actually recover.
Absolutely happy to provide that.
And maybe also to help with that context, any kind of views on how much kind of good quality audit prevents in terms of fraud, because obviously a lot of the benefit is in what doesn't therefore happen if we have good fraud. Thanks. Okay, does that draw us to a close on questions and points from members on this section? Great, thank you. In which case, can I ask that we note the CAFT and SIT year-end report? Thank you. Okay, great. We'll move on now to item 7. Item 7 is this C60 6-month progress update on the Enterprise Resource Planning Replacement Programme. And is it Jason? Great, thank you.
Afternoon, colleagues. My name is Jason Martin. I'm here to give or provide another update on the SAP replacement program, which is our enterprise resource planning solution. As you may or may not be aware, Our ERP system runs our HR, finance, purchase to pay and payroll process, so it's extensive and it runs across a large number of our activities and transactions for the council. In terms of where we are in terms of the programme and what's happened since the last report, there's been no material change to the programme budget, and I'm pleased to say the programme is still tracking broadly on schedule. Of course, with any ERP implementation, there are always challenges, but we do have a strong governance structure that allows us to detect those challenges early and proactively work towards mitigating them. One of the key aspects also is around us wanting to decommission lots of legacy applications. So the more legacy applications that we can decommission, it means there'll be more benefits and further savings. We have identified two applications that we do need to keep, which is around our direct debits and some of our supplier background checks, because what we already have in place is actually quite robust and is a market leader. So we don't want to do anything to distract that. In terms of programme savings, you'll see from the report that we've made 670k worth of savings in our 2026-27, which is ahead of the actual implementation, but we'll be working with colleagues to confirm what our savings are for the next financial year and beyond. In terms of costs and the way we're managing our costs, I think that from a programme perspective, we are working with finance very, very closely. We meet with them fortnightly to keep a real handle on our costs and the way the programme is progressing. In terms of our adoption of the new solution, which is absolutely critical, we're doing quite a lot of work with our people readiness group, so that's people from across the council who's going to help us to determine have they seen the communications, have they been involved in the training, has all the engagement been there. So again, this is more than just a technology implementation, but most definitely we're seeing it as a technology and a business change and a people change, and that's the way we would extract the benefits to come. So that concludes really the update for myself, but of course we'll take questions.
Thank you for that. Yep.
What is the age of the tool that's being replaced, and is it still being updated in terms of security updates from SAP?
Okay, so the tool that we have was implemented in 1999. In terms of updates, it is still being updated, so it is in support until 2027, but its useful life does not go beyond that. So this is why we are making the change now.
Do any other councillor? Yep, Richard.
Thanks for the report. Great that you're on budget and on time. Presumably you manage this through a risk register as well. What would you say, as it's currently your sort of top 3 risks with this project as per your register?
So when we look at the risk register and our particularly red items or our items that we regard as getting our highest focus, payroll, to making sure that our payroll is delivered on time and to the quality and specificity needed. So that will always be a challenge on ERP implementations, because payrolls are particularly difficult to assimilate and then make sure everything is absolutely correct. So that would be one of them. And another high priority risk and issue will be around our interface and integration. So as you can imagine, we have lots of other applications that we need to plug into our new ERP, and unfortunately there are some instances where we haven't got all the documentation we needed from what was being done before, so we're trying to plug those and make sure that they are adequately updated and the new business processes are adopted. And if you want a third one, the third issue on our issue register will always be around making sure we get people adequately trained, supported throughout, because again it's more so than just getting it all ready for go live. It's a continuum, so you have to do that beyond that, and we've got to make sure we've got all the resources to support that.
And so do you think you've sufficiently mitigated those risks as things stand?
Yeah, we're definitely controlling all of those risks. But again, we have health checks throughout to make sure, well, actually, have we done what we said we would do over the last 2 months? Do we need to do more? Or what support do we need from the organisation? So not only when we're looking at this, we think about, have we done enough? We also look, have we got the decision making around the table to help us? And we've got a strong programme board, but we also have the right integration of other boards within the council to give me the confidence that we will be fine.
Just one more. And in respect of our existing system, before it's switched off, from a cyber security point of view, given its age, are we confident that everything is safe and secure with the existing system?
Yeah, we are confident because it still receives the latest patches, the latest updates from SAP. So again, that will give us the confidence, and it sits within our existing infrastructure. Of course, we have to be ever vigilant.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. I'd like to pick up on a few points myself, if no other councillors are great. So I just wanted to first clarify. It says you said in the paragraph 13 the programme has savings targets of 668k, but I think you said there you'd actually delivered the savings for this year.
Yeah, so that's in advance or ahead of.
So those targets have been realised.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, that's good news. So I do appreciate that. Obviously, this is a kind of, we have no option, we must do this. But I would have thought we would have done a lot more, potentially a lot more work on benefits realisation. Do we have a clear, strong methodology around developing that aspect of the business case and capturing those benefits?
Yes, yes, we do. So in terms of benefit realisations, we're very, very clear about the benefits we thought we would expect at the very beginning. So we'll look at the solution, and this is what its capability. We've done several workshops, and now it's really about trying to align them and making sure they're traceable throughout the process. So yes, the work is ongoing, and we are following a clear methodology.
And when do you think you will have a kind of first cut of the benefits register, benefits that the programme expects to deliver over its longer life?
Yeah, we'll be expecting that imminently, so I'll say September to October.
Okay, so fingers crossed we might have for our next meeting.
Of course.
Great. What else would I note? They've got a relatively complex supply chain underpinning the transformation programme itself. What's your approach to kind of how you're governing and managing the interaction between suppliers, etc.? What role does the council itself see its take, and what kind of to kind of provide that intelligent client function? Yeah.
All right, so there's a number of questions packed into this. So the first things that we do is we have an integrated program plan that we all buy into. All right, so and it has to be realistic. So what we do have are realistic timescales. What we do have is an integrated program plan that all parties understand. And also in terms of our requirements, we've been particularly good at Southwark by not wanting to do things in just this is the way we do it at Southwark, we only want it this way. So we have definitely gone down to that adopt, not adapt approach. So again, that makes things a lot easier to manage. Of course, it isn't without its challenges, but again, this is why we have the various forums set up within the programme team to make sure that we can manage those and track progress against plan. And in terms of the council's responsibility, of course, the boards are in place, but we have lots of council staff who are working on the programme as well to make sure that we can drive it through.
Thank you. To pick up then, obviously I would often expect a programme like this to view change control risks, as, naturally kind of requirements or risks or whatever materialise and changes are needed, that is definitely an area of risk for both delivery and benefits realisation. Could you, there isn't any really kind of explanation in the report about, whether there have been any material changes that and what impact they may have been. I'm going to kind of come on at the end to kind of things I would quite like to see in September, but it'd be good just to kind of cover change control briefly.
Yeah, so in terms of change controls, we haven't had any significant change controls as raised by the supplier. Part of the reason for that is that we undertook a very robust procurement process and we're sticking to standard functionality.
That is very encouraging to hear. So I think going forward for September, I would like the report to bring out more around the kind of actual key milestones, maybe some form of plan on a page that we can see. Also, a summary of the key risks and mitigations, top 3 or whatever you feel is appropriate. And it similarly bring out whether there's been or confirm that there hasn't been any material changes since we last you provided your last report. Very keen to hear about the benefits side of it, as that is obviously realisation of those is a key risk in any programme like this. And if we could, very happy to work with you between now and September to kind of help make that a really rich, kind of helpful report for us going forward. Okay. Thank you for that. So I think that draws this agenda item to a close. Can we note that 6-month update on the Southwark 360 programme? Great, thank you. Okay, yes, on to item 8. Now we have the external audit plan for both Southwark Council and the Pension Fund, and I think leading the update is Fleur.
Lovely.
Great.
Hi, good
Thank
evening, everyone. I'm Fleur Niebuhr, and I'm the partner from KPMG who's responsible for the audit of the financial statements of the council. That's a role I've had. This is the beginning of my 3rd year as your partner responsible for doing that. And as part of the financial statements, I give 2 opinions, one over the financial statements themselves, and then in respect of value for money. I also am responsible for signing the pension fund audit. I'm here with Kunal, who's the manager for that, and he'll talk you through that plan in just a moment. They're quite long documents, I appreciate, so I thought I'd just draw out the key messages today, and then of course really happy to take questions from the committee. So in terms of the audit plan, we are just in the early stage of the audit this part of the year. So we've received the draft accounts and we start kind of auditing in earnest from the beginning of next week. We use materiality when auditing the accounts and we set that based on the expenditure. So on page 3, I've set out the materiality that we're working to, and that's 34.1 million. So if we were to identify transactions or errors or issues over that amount, we would require that to be corrected in order for the financial statements to be giving a true and fair view. We obviously work to a much lower level than that in terms of trying to detect any issues or errors. So our reporting threshold is 1.7 million. So anything below that is considered trifling in the context of the audit, and anything between that and our materiality, we will report to this committee and we'll have a discussion, firstly, of course, with management as to whether those get corrected, and we will present that back to you when I come later in the year with the conclusion of the audit work. The next area I thought it'd be useful to just draw out is page 5 of my document, and that's where I talk about the areas of significant financial statement risk. So those are the areas where I think it's most likely that there could be a material misstatement in the financial statements. So the first is the valuation of council dwellings. So that value on your balance sheet is very material, and it's a huge balance. You have the largest stock of council housing, as I'm sure you're well aware, and it's made up of a huge number of different units across the borough. There are quite a lot of assumptions that go into producing that value in the accounts, and there's lots of different data points that we have to look at as well. So the risk that if one of those was wrong, it could drive a material misstatement is relatively high. Having said that, in the past 2 years, we haven't found material misstatements, but still we have to look at that in a lot of detail. The second is management override of control, and I have to consider this a significant audit risk on every single audit that I do. And that is by virtue of the fact that management is in theory in a position to override the control environment. So this is where we look in quite a lot of detail at the different judgments and estimates that go into the accounts to make sure that they're sound and reasonable and well supported by evidence. And it's also where we do a lot of work over journal entries. So those are the sort of typically non-cash transactions that get booked into the ledger, the financial ledger, into the SAP system that you've just been hearing about. And we make sure we identify those that could be higher risk, and we make sure that they are well supported by audit evidence. So a good area of that is we're aware that your HRA is under pressure financially. There are very strict rules around what you can book as HRA expenditure versus general fund expenditure. So we have a criteria in our journals that might look at transfers from the HRA to the general fund to make sure that they're really legitimate. And that is something that you absolutely can do if there's a legitimate reason for that, but we make sure that they're really well supported. So it's those sorts of things that we think about in the context of the audit to make sure that we're comfortable. Then we have the valuation of your pension liability, post-retirement benefit obligations here. Again, that's a really large number on your balance sheet. There are a lot of assumptions that go into that. You'll see we've treated that as being slightly higher risk this year than last year, and that is really by virtue of the fact that it's a triennial year evaluation for the pension fund, which I'm sure Kunal will touch on in a moment. So rather than rolling forward assumptions, we'll have a whole new set of data from your actuaries that feed into that. So we want to make sure that we're really comfortable with how that has been put together. So that's the only reason why we think it's slightly higher risk. We expect, therefore, all things being equal, next year in the audit that will reduce. Then in terms of other areas that are higher risk but maybe not such a risk of material misstatement, we look at the valuation of your investment properties. Again, that's driven by the assumptions and the fact that you value them each year. And the broader valuation of land and buildings. So the council dwellings is a huge number, but you, of course, have a very large estate in terms of the schools and other properties that the council owns and is on the balance sheet. And there are different valuation methods. There is some new guidance now about how that valuation approach should be adopted by local authorities. So and you're revaluing everything this year. Sometimes you do that on a rolling basis. So again, we're looking at that in a little bit more detail. And then another area that we're looking at this year is the impairment of assets under construction. So you have quite large balances of assets under construction on your balance sheet as well. And we are looking at that in some detail this year, just to make sure that we're really comfortable with the way in which you consider indicators for impairment. For example, we know we do a lot of work in the social housing sector as well, outside of local authorities. There's quite a lot of contractor risk. You can sometimes see that impact the cost of schemes if one of your contractors were to get into financial difficulty and you had to appoint somebody else. There could be costs that you weren't getting the benefit from, and there should be consideration of whether that should be impaired and written down. So we're looking at that in quite a lot of detail this year as well. Of course, there are a huge number of balances that we audit as well, but those are the areas where we think they're more susceptible to risk, or they're more inherently complex and judgmental, and that's why we focus on those. We've then captured in some detail what we call rebut the significant risk of fraudulent recognition of revenue and expenditure. And these are areas that as auditors we have to consider as a risk, but in a public sector and local authority setting, it's quite common to see the fraud risk of revenue recognition rebutted. I'm sure some of you will be aware this all came about kind of post-Enron in terms of inflated profit. The revenue that you receive, although they're large values, they're relatively straightforward to support an audit in terms of the way in which you receive your income through grant funding and rental income. And we've highlighted on page 13 the reasons for that, and on 14 similarly expenditure recognition where we rebut that, but rather we do consider areas of risk through our journals testing like I described in terms of the HRA. We do have to consider your financial statements as a group audit by virtue of the fact that you have a whole number of schools that essentially get consolidated into your accounts. None of those is significant enough in its own right to be considered a material component. So we do some overall work on the balances, but we don't identify procedures at individual schools because in the context of your financial statements, they are too small. It is, of course, an area that you have lots of controls over and the internal audit would look at. The other thing just to touch on is the way in which we approach value for money. So we're not looking through our work at whether value for money has been achieved. That's not the purpose of what we're required to do. But we do have to look in quite a lot of detail at the arrangements that the council has put in place to ensure it is achieving value for money. And we look at that in the context of financial sustainability and the way in which you produce your budgets, the way in which you monitor those, the decision making that goes into that. We look at it in terms of governance, particularly in terms of financial risk. We look at things like what's in your risk register and make sure we're really comfortable with how that's being reported and the mitigations. And we look at the arrangements you put in place for achieving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. So that's looking at a lot of the kind of KPIs you report, how you monitor contractors, the way in which you might assess the risk to some of those big partnership arrangements that you've got in place, those sorts of things. And it is an area where we have identified weaknesses in arrangements in the last 2 years. So, and we will follow up on those as we go through the audit, and we will, of course, look at all of those arrangements again for the year end in March 2026. I also, at this time of year, have to confirm our audit fees, which are on page 27, and our independence as your auditors, which I'm very happy and able to do. We do provide some non-audit services to the council. They are permissible services, and they're primarily grant returns over things like your housing benefits and the teachers' pensions return and the pooling of capital receipts. They are done by a separate team, but they're permissible services and often expected that the auditor would undertake that work. But for transparency, we capture that here for you. I think then I will just pause there on the council's plan before I hand over to Kunal and just open up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That was very helpful. In relation to the revenue audit, you've said you're going to rebut the audit requirements for council tax and business rates and that sort of thing. When was that last audited?
We do audit it.
Oh, you do audit it?
So we absolutely audit it. What we rebut is that there's a fraud risk that you could manipulate and overstate your revenue by virtue of those revenue streams. So no, it's a really fair question. So we absolutely do audit all of those balances. They are large, but often it's really straightforward to audit. You will get confirmations from central government of the amount of funding that you're going to receive. You often will have received it by the time we complete the audit. We can see not only that it agrees, but also that it's been received into your bank accounts, for example. Similarly, kind of rental income, you set the rents, we're able to see how, it would be very hard to manipulate it to fraudulently report that you were receiving more revenue than you were.
Thank you.
Any other questions from councillors? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
In which case, on to the pension.
Perfect. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm here to present the pension fund audit plan. So I'll take you through the pension fund plan. Likewise, we have materiality set for the pension fund, and the materiality for the pension fund has been set based upon our 31st March 2025 numbers. That's when we've started using the planning and risk assessment procedures. And we started using that number as our base for materiality, which is 22.6 million. And as Fleur mentioned, we have to report any audit misstatements for the thresholds which we are going to use for our misstatements, which is going to be 1.1 million. So any misstatements which we have identified ranging from 1.1 million until 22.6 million, we are going to come back and discuss it with the management, and of course we'll flag it to the committee beforehand. This is set on page 3 of the pension fund plan. As I move forward, on page 5 of the pension fund plan, similar to the council's plans, we have identified multiple ranges of risk around it. The first one is around the significant risk for the management override of controls, which is more or less on the same lines as we've discussed for the councils. I'll move on to the next one in line, which is inappropriate amount of estimated for the value of directly held investment property. Now, this is something which is one of the major areas for the pension fund, as one of the values which is quite high on the balance sheet, and then the estimation uncertainties which goes beyond within the valuation for the directly held properties. Now, this is one of the areas which we look at it by engaging our real estate valuation specialist, and they perform their valuation testings by using and ensuring that the assumptions which are used by the specialist are reasonable and in line with within our benchmarks. Other than the valuation of directly held investment properties, we have other assets as well, which are ranged between level 1, level 2, level 3. We kind of categorize these ones into 4 categories. One being the segregated assets, which are easy to value. They are straightforward. The prices are available on the market, and our specialist team can jump into those valuations and portals, and they can extract those prices and value those ones off. Other ones are the level 1, level 2 pooled investments. They are a little more difficult to value than the segregated assets, but there's not high level of estimation uncertainty goes into those valuation. So we obtain direct confirmations from the fund managers, and we ourselves go back to the portals of the fund managers or the funds and obtain those prices and perform the valuation testing for those ones. Then the third category comes in the ULIPs, which is a single service providers who provide these funds, and we go back to them, we ask for their confirmations, we obtain their willingness to transact those particular transactions for those particular funds. We haven't noticed any issues within these 3 sets of categories in the past as well. Having said that, not on the 4th one as well as such as materials, but the level 3 ones are the ones which are majorly requires the estimation uncertainties and would require more assumptions into it, and hence we've categorized them separately. Again, we are going back to them, asking for their valuation confirmations, and we are going to perform our retrospective reviews to ensure that there is no issues and the relevance and reliability for the information which is used in that valuations are being assessed properly. Having said that, the last risk which we have lined up over here is the contributions to the pension funds, which are not completely identified and recorded and do not exist or not in compliance with the regulations. Now, this is one of the areas which pension fund gets their income. That's the revenue for the pension funds, and we are going to look into this in more detail around it, that how the pension funds is getting the contributions from their members, and this includes the admitted bodies, scheduled bodies, administrating authorities as well. I'll move on to the next page, which is on the appendixes, is on page 17, which is where we've lined up the fees for the pension fund accounts. And then the confirmations, which is on confirmation of independence, which is on page 19, and we are happy to confirm that we are independent. That is it, but I'm happy to take any questions around it.
Thank you. Yes. Do we have any questions from councillors on this? Okay, great. Thank you. Can we therefore note the external audit plan for the year ending 31st of March 2026 and also the external audit plan for the pension fund? Duly noted. Thank you. Okay. Item 9, Internal Audit Progress Report, July 2026. And I meant to say at the start that Aaron Winter from BDO, BDO, I don't know if they're still Stoy Hayward, it shows you how old I am. Is you? We are just BDO now. Yeah, there you go. We are from BDO Stoy. And Aaron couldn't make it, is that right? Or Angela? Angela. Fine, sorry, apologies. Thank you for making it. Over to you.
So good evening, my name's Aaron Winter. I'm a partner at BDO, and we have been providing the outsourced internal audit function, so I've been acting as the head of internal audit for the council, and obviously we'll be handing the reins over to Paul. So I've got 2 reports, so item 8 and 9. I'm going to cover 8, and I'm obviously going to take the papers as read, but there are a couple of points I just wanted to flag. Obviously, as our final meeting, I just wanted to give some assurance of where we are with the 25-26 internal audit plan. So our first report is our progress report, and I'm happy to confirm that we've completed all of our work for the year. You will see there that it's a rather long report, this committee. It's effectively a wrap-up of a number of reviews. So we provide, as we have done in the past, summaries of all the final reports that we've concluded, and there's actually 19 in the pack tonight. So that was as a result of coming to the end of the year and wrapping up that work. The committee may note that there were 9 reports that we had in draft at the stage, and we included the draft opinions for completeness. Since the paper deadline, we've actually finalised a further 4 in relation to travel assistance, culture and events, asset management and the labour market TMO, and I can confirm the opinions that are in the report tonight have remained the same, so there were no changes to the outcomes. And those further 5 reports that we've got in draft stage we expect to be the same, but we will conclude on those as well. What that does mean is it enables us to bring our annual report and head of internal audit opinion, which I will obviously cover as a second item, as a result of completing all the work. The report has 2 appendices attached. The first one is in relation to the follow-up of previously raised internal audit recommendations, and I'm really pleased to obviously confirm that the implementation rate is up at 99.4%. I think that's probably been the highest we've ever achieved, with only 2 outstanding recommendations that have fallen due. So any recommendations that obviously we've raised in our current reporting that haven't fallen due, we'll obviously hand over to Paul and his team to obviously follow up under their regime. And you will see there in appendix, the appendix, we've offered an update on the progress of those 2 recommendations, which are due to be completed in September, so not too far in the distant future. And then the final report is again another annual report that we always bring. This is Appendix 3, and it relates to our school summary report. So actually, as the external auditors have just referred to, as part of the internal audit plan, we always do a cyclical review of a number of schools to provide the council with assurance of their financial management, budget control, etc., over a core set of kind of tests that we conduct. And this report is summarising all of the work that we've done throughout the year, covering 10 cyclical school audits, but also a focused thematic review on pension administration and management that the council requested us to do, which covered a number of other schools. The benefit of this report, it provides you as a committee with a summary of the outcomes and actually what the core themes were we were finding from the schools. They're not too dissimilar to previous audits, and as you can imagine, we are doing a cyclical basis, so therefore when we find improvements, what this report does is enable us to share that across the whole schools community. So any school that hasn't been audited will see the outcomes of this and be able to do proactive kind of review and self-check against that. So that was all I was going to say on the progress report, so happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any specific questions? I would just like, therefore, to ask. I did it. I held the button down. Finally had to happen. Sorry, councillors. Thank you. So the question I'd like to just pick up on specifically is really around time-critical, urgent recommendations. Are you kind of comfortable that the processes that we have in place within SOLIC are addressing, allow those to be addressed and also reported back effectively to you that they have been resolved where necessary?
I'm happy to confirm yes. So we've worked with management and across the organisation to ensure that we've got a really good, robust protocol for follow-up of recommendations. So it starts with the finalisation of the report and engaging kind of the strategic kind of directors and heads of service to ensure that we agree pragmatic timescales. I think if we went back in the past, and I'm sure Clive would agree, that sometimes there was probably appeasement of let's just agree a date with the internal auditors, then they will leave us alone. And what we were finding is that actually the resources to implement and action some of these recommendations was a lot higher than expected, so it did take longer. So we're being really robust in our check and challenge at that stage, and what that now is meaning is that we're getting really realistic timescales, and when we then follow up for evidence to confirm they've been implemented, they are happening on time, and I think that's then therefore reflected of the 99.4% implementation rate to date. And also what I should have said is that those recommendations that are due are ones that we've raised in the latter half of 25-26, so are actually quite recent internal audits. So for me, that should be a positive sign of a kind of an organisational health and a good barometer of kind of compliance in the organisation.
Felix?
Are you, given that you're handing over, are you confident in the team that we have staffed to take over from you? And do you have any concerns about that team at this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably appropriate I take that one because it's my call and my statutory responsibility in terms of the adequacy and completeness of the Internal Audit Service. So yes, is the answer to the question. I think BDO have given us some very strong support over a number of years, and we'll probably thank them at the end of the next agenda item, but not yet, haven't. And actually, I look forward to continuing that relationship with BDO because they support the shared service going forward. But I think it's important that we grow from within. I think to add resilience to the structure as well, and also to do some joint learning, and having Paul on board as the sort of very experienced shared head, sort of with Lambeth and now with us as well, I think will enhance the service rather than put it at risk.
Thank you. Yeah, Siobhan.
Thank you, Chair. This is possibly one for the work plan, but I suppose one of the things that I look for here is around like trends. So we can see kind of low effectiveness in two reports relating to the Director of Adult Social Care with regards to nursing and residential care and waiting lists, older people and physical disabilities. Considering our job is to scrutinise governance, it feels possibly suitable for this Commission to invite the Director of Adult Social Care to this Commission to talk about the effectiveness in those areas.
Any other thoughts on that from councillors? Are we happy to extend that invitation? Oh, yeah, anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the new meeting of a new committee. I guess in previous iterations of the committee, we have picked up themes with chief officers, asked them to bring some assurance where committees have had concerns, or as part of a wider governance review of particular areas. What I probably would say as we get onto the internal audit plan going forward, it'd be very easy to agree a very straightforward plan which gives lots of green assurances, and I think with limited internal audit support, I think it's important for us to gain assurance, but also use that in known areas of risk, so to speak, and we'll speak about the risk register and such like in future meetings. So giving us some assurance where we know the organisation has its challenges or has its demand pressures and such like is important, but that probably means that over the course of time we bring more and more reports that are flagging risks, and as you rightly say, Councillor, sort of providing assurances to you that those risks are being managed.
Yeah.
Yes was the answer.
That's fine.
Okay, so we've noted that action. Great, thank you. So formally, I think we want to obviously take each of the agenda items in turn. So I'll specifically say, is there any further questions on the internal audit progress report itself? Item 9. Okay. In which case, can we note the update reports? I'll take that as consent. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 10, which was the annual report and opinion for 2025-26 for the internal audit. Again, do we have any specific questions on that section? Okay, great. Thank you. And again, then, can we note the audit update report? Great. Finally, for this section is 11, the internal audit risk-based plan strategy, charter and mandate. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm presenting to you this evening 3 core documents for approval. So it's the internal audit plan for 26-27, an internal audit strategy, as well as the internal audit charter and mandate. And these are 3 core documents that support the internal audit service over the coming years. So the plan has been prepared on a risk basis. I've met with directors, I've met with strategic directors, I've reviewed internal audits work over the last few years, I've looked at what the risks and risk registers are for the council, as well as what internal audit and counter fraud work we've undertaken. And I prepared a plan on that basis, and I'm presenting that this evening to you for approval, which supports the independence of internal audit. In terms of the plan itself, it's aimed at providing assurance over the council's highest priority risks, and I've mapped the internal audit plan against those risks for you, and that's in Appendix 2. Having said that, the plan is always flexible. So while I'm presenting a plan for you for the whole year, I will certainly formally review it after 6 months and then bring it back to this committee for approval. Equally, if there are any significant changes to that plan in the interim, I will bring those back to this committee for approval so that you've got clear oversight on what's happening with internal audit over the coming year. The strategy sets the medium-term direction of the service. I think it's important, as me as an incoming head of internal audit, that you have a sense of where I'd like to take the service over the coming next 3 years, and I welcome any challenge if you think I've missed the mark in any of those areas. And then the internal audit charter and mandate is a very long document, I appreciate, and that's why I've added a kind of at a glance charter and mandate 2-page exec summary for you. It hits on a large number of standards. I think the professional standards for internal audit are some 132 pages long. I certainly wouldn't want to bore you with all of those details. They're available if you'd like to read them. But this charter is aligned to those standards, so it is lengthy. It does cover off a lot of points that need to be covered off. I hope you forgive me for the length of it, but it's an important document, and it covers my independence, responsibilities, position in the organisation, and equally your role and responsibilities in relation to internal audit, which I hope in total is helpful. And as you've heard tonight, the internal audit service has moved to a shared service model. So I'm in the process of recruiting in-house staff to support the internal audit delivery. So we are now in a shared service with Lambeth. In the interim, Aaron and the team will still be supporting me in delivering that internal audit activity. In fact, Aaron and the team support me at Lambeth, so we're already familiar with how we work, and we work well together, and I've got no concerns in relation to that going forward. Having said that, understandably, I'll have to go out to tender at some point for a new contract, and we'll look to do that for both authorities at the same time. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions the committee might have.
What proportion of your team, like how much have you taken? How big is your team at the moment, and how big do you plan it to be when you take over from BDO fully?
So the internal audit team at the moment is me, and going forward I will be recruiting a deputy head of internal audit, 2 senior internal auditors and 2 auditors, one of which I'd like to be an apprentice. I think it's important to bring people into the profession and support the local population in terms of gaining meaningful and insightful employment. So I would like to see a good 80% of the plan delivered in-house and 20% externally. Now that's not going to happen in the next 3 months. That's got, I've got to recruit those staff, and they'll have notice periods, etc. But I'd like to get to the point where we deliver the majority of the plan in-house, and we're supplemented by internal audit, supplemented by BDO or a similar delivery partner, which is really useful in areas, like IT audit and other areas where you need definitive expertise to offer real insight into areas.
Thank you, Chair. So my question maybe builds on one that was asked earlier on around the kind of merits of internal, doing it internally rather than using external organisations. So, the benefits of doing it externally is that there's probably greater impartiality, you might say. Although Tim's shaking his head, so maybe not. But I suppose there is the potential for a greater risk as you move from an external model to doing it internally. And I suppose my question is, you spoke about a couple of local authorities that, you know, Lambeth, for example, and Croydon that you touched on as well. Is this something that local authority, is this a direction of travel that generally local authorities are going down by doing it internally, or it'd just be quite good to understand like what's happening across London, local authorities more generally when it comes to doing this stuff internally?
Certainly. So I sit on the London Audit Group meeting, and we do often do surveys of, you know, what the arrangements are. There's been a slight decrease in fully outsourced internal audit in favour of what are co-sourcing models, and that's what I'd say this model is. It's a co-sourcing model, and that's the most common because you get the benefits of an in-house team and the benefits of an external team supporting the in-house team. So you maximise those opportunities. In terms of independence and objectivity, I understand the perception, and it's not uncommon that external firms are seen as more independent than an in-house team. But I can assure you that you as a committee are here to support me to be independent. So if I need to give you the difficult messages and management are reluctant to hear that, I will be relying on you as a committee to help me speak up and say when I think there's an issue. Now, I've never had to rely on a committee for that reason, but that's part of the independence role. I am professionally required to be independent. The standards set me as being independent. There are lots of safeguards in place to make sure that I'm independent, one of which is a direct reporting line to this committee and freedom to speak to each and every one of you individually as you wish or as I need to raise any issues. So I'm comfortable that I'll be independent, and I will assert that to you clearly in the Head of Internal Audit opinion, but equally I'll also be subject to what's called an external quality assessment, which will be done independently, and they will then give you assurance whether I can act independently or not. So I'm comfortable that we'll get there and be where you want us to be, but at the same time I think a co-sourcing model is really good, and that's the most common delivery model across most councils across the country, even outside of London. So it's the benefits of both worlds, I think.
Yeah, if I can supplement Paul's answer, it might be to some extent the reverse, Councillor, in the sense if I've had the privilege of working as a head of audit both for an internal model and an external model, and excluding colleagues and companies in the room, it wasn't yours, Aaron. Internally, my objectives were around quality of service, compliance with statutory obligations, some of the issues we've been speaking today. Externally, my objectives around client satisfaction and fee income. So a lot of it comes down to the individual and such like, and that's not universal across the piece, but that's been my personal experience, which is why I've always favoured the internal model, where you can build relationships with individuals, and that in turn gives that trust and confidence for them to speak truth to power.
Thank you. Any final or further comments from questions from councillors?
Just on the draft plan, sort of more of a technical point that you've got on the list there, data protection. Are you planning to sort of look more broadly at cyber security, or literally just data protection?
So there have been audits of cybersecurity, and there are other audits on this plan that will support me providing assurance over the cybersecurity arrangements. That particular audit is predominantly going to be focused on how we manage and respond to subject access requests, breaches, and meet our obligations under the Data Protection Acts. But in that, it will still, if not indirectly, inform, you know, our own cybersecurity risks and how we're managing. A lot of security breaches, data breaches, result of sending emails to the wrong people, for example.
Okay, because the reason I asked that was just looking at how you've mapped across the risks. And you've got there sort of cybersecurity, IT, and data, which is why I thought perhaps there might be a bigger focus on cybersecurity in your audit plan.
I'll have to double check I'll have to come back to you with a more precise answer, but in terms of the audit plans from previous years, certainly 25-26, I believe there was an audit of cybersecurity. I might look to my colleague behind me.
cybersecurity vulnerability management was covered. We also did backup and restoration, and we've also done major incident response and business continuity, which all had an IT lens on it.
So recent, okay. Yeah,
Exactly, and that, I thought that was the case. I thought there'd be a reason why I haven't put cybersecurity on there, but I couldn't quite remember what Aaron and the team had looked at. But I was content that we could pick it up indirectly through other audits. So
great, thank you.
Apologise for asking someone from the.
No, that's all right.
Any further questions from councillors on this item? Okay, in which case, can we approve the internal audit plan for 26-27, the 3-year internal audit strategy, and the internal audit charter and mandate? Great, thank you, thank you, thank you. Item 12, the draft annual governance statement 2025-26. Geraldine to present.
Thank you, Chair. It's a bit of a long document. It's a statutory document that goes with the accounts. I guess the key areas to point out would be Table 1, the insurance framework. So this is basically trying to map the insurance framework into what we do in kind of Southwark. So the first line will be management. The second line is risk and compliance, and that's assurance statements and the risk management strategies and arrangements for management of risk. The third line is internal audit, which we've just heard from Paul and Tim. And then we have the external auditors, which is the third line, along with other external bodies. We've had the regulator of social housing as well. And then the final line is yourselves, Council Assembly, performance management and the executive. So, and each of those areas have been they're discussed in the following paragraphs of how we actually manage that and how we, what the governance arrangements for all that is. So it's quite lengthy. And then from there, we have to do a statutory bit. I'm going to find it in my stuff, which is the assurance statement and the pathway. A lot of the structure of this report is led by SIP for code, and it's slightly different from last year. Some people weren't here last year, but last year it was formatted slightly differently. We've got, again, the structure is quite prescribed. So we have to do a formal assurance statement, list out the assurances that Southwark have, and then we go on to the governance issues, which is from paragraph 4.1, it's page 233, which we look at all the actions and outcomes from the previous statement so that you can see what we've done about the actions that were raised and issues that were raised. So we have one on climate, cost of living, and there's social housing, and they're all mapped in that table into the individual paragraphs to show what we've done and the actions that have taken place, so there's some accountability. And then the final thing that we are prescribed to do is have to look at potential risks for next year, for 26-27, and that's in table 5 of looking ahead, and it's page 247. So the things we're looking at for next year will be the economic climate and the fair funding review and reduction in funding for Southwark, which we've already looked at, but it comes up every year and it's still relevant every year. Statutory changes in procurement, our transformation, use of AI, and of course the local elections in May 2026 with a new joint administration from yourselves. So it covers all the statutory elements. Once we have comments, any comments you have on the statement, I will incorporate those into the statement. I will then send it to external audit, and then it will come back to the committee September, October for a final approval. And then once it's approved, it gets signed by the leader and the chief executive of the council and places a final account on the council website. I'm happy to take any questions, comments.
Councillors, any? Okay, I have a couple of points. Done it again. Right. So yeah, thank you. I have a couple of points I'd like to raise. I think as resolutions. Firstly, with regard to this year's annual governance statement, I would like it to be updated to reflect the role of anchor institutions and the anchor network in our overall kind of governance approach. Thank you. Everybody happy with that? Thank you. Looking ahead to next year's governance statement, I would like it to be updated to reflect a fuller description of the Council's commercial governance arrangements once the revised procurement framework and associated operating arrangements have become more embedded and are able to demonstrate delivery and outcomes. Thank you. Yep, Graham.
Chair, you must excuse me, this isn't about the content of the report, but rather the presentation of the report. So please let me indulge. A couple of years ago, we had a motion to council that we were going to adopt a house style which was ranged left and not justified. It's especially important for people who are dyslexic, who struggle, I understand, who struggle to read type when it's justified. So in future, perhaps, and I'm sorry, this isn't about the content, but about the presentation, but I wondered if you could note that, please, for future. Thank you.
Can actually change that for the final draft.
That'd be
No
lovely.
problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Of course. So are we happy that next year's government, Richard?
Apologies if I've missed this, but Southwark does have subsidiary companies, doesn't it? It doesn't have any subsidiaries?
No, none.
Okay. Wanted to double check because
no operational ones there. If you go online and search it, historically there has been a dormant company that isn't used a number of years ago. But no, we don't have any currently, and we haven't used any.
Because I was supposed to see if there should be something in here if there was, but that's good that there isn't. That's fine.
Okay, my final request on next year's annual government statement for 26-27, that it be updated to reflect the programme of the administration elected in May 2026, including but not limited to the prioritisation of community resilience and adaptation in response to the increasing severity of climate change impacts on the borough.
So if I can try and be helpful, Chair, so noted the comments around this year's statement on anchor institutions. I guess it's difficult for us to make resolutions around a document that we haven't written yet for next year. So if we take that as your comments on the forward look, we'll build that into our planning as we put together the 26-7 document, and we'll pick that up over the course of the sort of development of that document going forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillors, happy with that? Those 2 points are around the procurement, commercial governance arrangements, and around just the overall kind of programme of the new administration are reflected in the updated annual government statement. John?
So, Chair, you spoke about the role of anchor institutions, and I just wondered if you could expand a bit more on exactly what you mean by that.
Sure. We think I think the role of major anchor institutions, kind of major educational institutions, etc., other public sector organisations, the major institutions across that are critical and very important to Southwark. We do bring them into our kind of overall discussions, as I understand it, through the anchor network, and but how we actually work with them to kind of inform what the council does, how we manage risks, how we kind of overall achieve the best for the borough, isn't brought out in the current governance statement, and I'm just looking for that to be recognised and explained in that. I'm keen for feedback from officers on that as well.
I think we can incorporate that. I think traditionally, generally the annual governance statement is about how Southwark as a council governs itself. So I think the extent to which we're going to recognise anchor institutions might be slightly more on the fringes, just in terms of how we. But I'm sure we can incorporate that.
Yeah, I kind of got suggested just a couple of sentences to acknowledge the presence of Anchor. I think is a good point. Happy to do that within. I think we did it a couple of years ago, to be honest, when we looked at the peer challenge. So it was in there at that point, and I think it's come to this committee as in the peer challenge as well. So it's not out of it's not out of sync with what you've currently done. So that's fine. I'll add that in.
John?
Thank you, Chair. I know the Rona, Assistant Chief Executive, was doing quite a bit of work on how Southwark as a council works with anchor institutions as part of Southwark 2030. But from my understanding, the engagement with those anchor institutions has not been as formal as it once was. So I think it's fine to reference them in the governance statement, but I think what that means in practice at the moment, I think this committee would need more confidence about how the joint administration intends to work with those anchor institutions before it can be included in a governance statement like this.
So just to clarify, all I'm looking for in the current one is a kind of statement around what the facts around how that there is the anchor network and the extent to which it has or hasn't got a role in governance at the moment, and just so that that's kind of a baseline for us then to look forward as we see how governance may change with regard to the role of anchor institutions over the coming years. On that basis, with those points kind of agreed, can we therefore collectively note the draft annual governance statement? Great, thank you. Item 13, compliance with the SIPFA Financial Management Code. Again, Geraldine, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I bring this every year. It's part of it's part of the annual governance statement. We use it as SIPFA did I'm going to start again. SIPFA did a published an FM code of management for local authorities at a time that was quite difficult in 2019. When a lot of authorities were coming under financial pressure and there's more Section 114 notices going out, so they produced a kind of a code to make sure that we could, as local authorities, assure ourselves that we were financially sustainable and our governance arrangements around that were secure. It came into effect in 2020 during COVID. So what we do, we map out. It's a very long document at the back. I apologise for that, and it's also a little bit dull. But what we actually end up doing was we map each into the individual kind of standards called an FM standard reference, and there's loads of guidance notes, and then we kind of look at where we fall within that, how we can comply with that, and we update it every year. It's quite a good, useful, I think, mechanism to show where we probably could do better, or where we. So the first couple of years, it was quite interesting. Now we know what to publish. We know the areas that we can do probably better. And then part of it also, another key part of it is SIPFA do what's called a financial resilience index to show where we are on certain kind of indicators, including level of reserves and increase in reserves and debt management. So we do that as well to see where we're placed compared to other authorities, and that forms part of it as well. So I think we're very compliant, to be honest, and I think if you looked at others published audit, but it probably isn't as long as ours. So there we go. Maybe that's a kind of indicator of how good we are. Thank you. Any questions?
Sorry, I'm conscious Geraldine's referenced long reports multiple times during this meeting. It might just be helpful, certainly in the context of a new committee, to just draw out that the high-level purposes. We've just looked at the annual governance statement, which is really just about the overall governance of the council. This is a much more operational piece, which is looking specifically at the financial management, how the financial function is operating. We've also seen internal audit, which is looking at controls earlier. They're all sort of doing different things. I think it's just helpful to sort of piece together. A lot of these reports are long, wordy. A lot of them have a lot of duplicated information, perhaps, but they're all serving different purposes. It's just helpful to understand those. Later in the year, we'll see the statement of accounts, which will confirm that we're accounting for things properly, but it doesn't confirm that we're spending things well. So we also have a report called the Value for Money Report, which our auditors will read, which confirms whether or not we're actually spending the money in a good way. So there's a range of different reports that are all doing different things, and it's just helpful, I think, to understand they've all got this purpose. And as we go through the year, through the work plan, it will start to become more apparent what these different reports are doing.
Thank you. Clive?
Yeah, this one's a really important one for certainly Tim, myself and Geraldine. So yes, it's dry and there's a lot of detail in there, but as a check against ourselves, that are we doing the basics right? This is how we transparently can demonstrate that to the community, but also demonstrate that to ourselves. And as part of our own team's business planning, we've got a session tomorrow, you know, where we feel we're exposed to a little bit of risk or we're not performing quite as well as we are, we can pick that up and take it back into the organisation to make sure we don't lose sight of what's, you know, in the context of what we do on a day in, day out basis, not losing sight of those core principles and those core basics is buried within this document. So as Geraldine says, yes, it's quite dry, but this one's a really important one for us within finance, and as a result of that, how we underpin and support the rest of the organisation to be the best it can be.
Thank you. Felix?
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask about trajectory of these reports? So if you started in 2019, presumably you identified some areas that we could improve on, and then we improved on them, and then now we're, you know, in 2026. So how, like, what percentage of completion? Is there any backsliding? What does that look like?
Thank you. I think because this is around process rather than a kind of action, I would say that the areas that when I went through it and my team went through it, think, well, where are we strong and where are we, could we do better? I think capital and balance sheet reconciliations came up a couple of years ago, and I thought, oh, actually, we could do better with those. We could look at the balance sheet more. Local authorities don't do that as much because we don't really have the same kind of structural framework as private industry does. But I thought actually there was a kind of area on that capital and the balance sheet that we could actually do a bit more formally within my team. So we are now doing that. In terms of backsliding, I don't think we will. So I think once we improve a process, we stick with that improved process. We are always trying to improve processes when things aren't great. But generally speaking, I think that was the area. Every other area we're already doing. I think that was the key one that for me came out. I think in the Financial Resilience Index, we do that every year. We can see our data across benchmarked across other local authorities, and the same issues kind of are the same. So is pressures in adult and children's social care, that's the same across all London local authorities. And, you know, so we know we're not at the back end of that at all. We're right in the middle. We know where we are in the middle. We know where we have more kind of issues than others, you know, probably in, you know, we've got a very large housing stock, so that is kind of, we're an outlier the number of homes we have, so we can compare that. So it's about kind of making sure that we're not a massive outlier, and if we are an outlier, why are we? And, you know, those are the issues. I think the index is good, so we do that on a, you know, as soon as the data comes out. Data's a bit lagged, I have to say, because it uses what's called revenue outturn returns from local authorities. So it's about a year and a half out of date, but it's quite good because you can see where we move bit by bit. So I wouldn't say it's backsliding. I think it's just a constant cycle of improvement, to be honest. And I think that was the only one I can remember in the last 2 or 3 years, and it's only been going for, you know, a few years. So that helps.
And presumably, one of the ways we would get confidence that these processes are obviously actually being enacted and followed, etc., is through, for example, internal audit. So that's and other mechanisms like that, which this is the kind of benchmark, or, you know, what the council should be delivering against. And then we have some of these other internal checks which help us ensure that these controls and processes are being delivered.
Absolutely, we do. And also, with this particular report, the evidence is in column 3 effectively. So it's, every time we bring this report, which is usually once a year, you can take a look through this third column. Anything that stands out, you can question us on this. It's, that's the requirement of the code, is that we evidence it within this report.
Any final comments or questions on the report? Great. Okay, can we therefore note the report? Thank you. Thank you. We are now on to item 14, which is the formation of the Audit, Governance and Standards subcommittees for 26-27. We, of course, have 2 subcommittees to select, the membership of the Standards Subcommittee and the what's called Civic Awards Subcommittee. I'm keen for us to have an initial kind of discussion about how we want to approach this before we then start taking nominations. Who would like to open that discussion?
I'm happy to, Chair. How many? Let me start with a question. How many members will there be on the committee?
Sorry if I cut you off there. My mistake. So, as my understanding is, for the Standards Subcommittee there are 3 members, and then for the Civic Awards Committee there are 4 members. Okay. And we would normally expect them to be. Do you want to pick up on that?
These are proportionate with the Overview and Scrutiny subcommittees, so we would expect the Standards Subcommittee to have 1 member from each party, and we would expect the Civic Awards Subcommittee to have 1 Green, 1 Liberal Democrat and 2 Labour members, ideally with an equal gender split and preferably with a representative demographic presence. Membership has to be taken from the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee and its reserves. So you are welcome to nominate people who aren't in the room currently and therefore cannot defend themselves.
Mayor, we've spoken, and I'd like to stand for both of the committees.
Great, thank you.
I'm a white male, but that's the best that we've got, I think.
Won't comment on your age either.
nor economic status, nor education, nor abilities.
Having sat on this committee before, we have always had a bit of a problem with gender representation here. The report does say for the Civic Awards that, as close as possible, it's helpful for at least 2 of the members to be women. I've sort of briefly mentioned this to Councillor Dobson, but I would like to propose here, if that's okay. Again, the Civic Awards, the chart there in paragraph 14 says, recommends 2 Labour representatives, so I'm happy to propose myself as well.
Thank you for that. We'll take formal nominations in a minute. We have had the opportunity to talk to Pascal, who's a reserve member, and she would also be very keen to be part of the Civic Awards Subcommittee. For the Standards Subcommittee itself, is there any thoughts on who you might like to have for that?
I would like to nominate Councillor Dobson again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
6 months every 5 years.
I'm certainly hoping that that's the case. I would also, because I do think it's a very important committee, for when it does sit, I would also like to stand for that, though noting the demographic challenges of the available kind of members for the committee.
For the Standards Subcommittee, it is less relevant for that. The Civic Awards is the one where previous committees have been keen to see a representation of the population, considering they're there to praise the population as a whole.
Very good point, thank you. So what I suggest we do is let's take each in turn, agree the membership, and then look at who will be to kind of chair. So for the standards subcommittee, the proposals we've had are myself, Colin Boyle. Could I have a seconder? Thank you. Then Graham. Thank you. Great, thank you. So then we also do need to select a chair for the committee from those three. I would like to stand as chair for the committee. Do you have anyone who would second me? Thank you. Would anyone else like to stand as chair from yourselves? Okay, great. Do we do a formal for and against?
We're happy
Unless
to accept that by claim.
By acclaim, is that acceptable to the committee?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, great. So then on to the Civic Awards Subcommittee. I believe we have therefore 4 nominations for that. We'll take that in turn. So firstly, I would like to nominate Pascal Mitchell. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Then Graham, I believe, and seconded. Then Esme, and seconded, thank you. And then John, and seconded, thank you. Excellent. So then we would move on to selection of the chair. I would like to nominate Pascal to be chair of the subcommittee, the Civic Awards subcommittee. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Would you like to propose a chair?
I'd like to nominate myself for chair.
Great, okay, fair enough. So we have 2 options for chair. So we will then, as my understanding, we go round and will we do each in turn? Is that...
I would ask for votes in favour of Pascal, please. Pascal Mitchell. We have 4 votes in favour of Pascal Mitchell. Votes in favour of John Batterson. We have 3 votes for John Batterson. Under that, the votes are in favour of Pascal Mitchell being chair of the Audit, Governance and Standards Civic Awards Subcommittee.
Thank you. Thank you, committee, for selecting the members for these 2 committees for 26-27. Well, we're doing all right for time, which is good. We are on to our final agenda item, I believe. Yes, in your review of work programme 26-27. So, Virginia, would you like to present on that for us?
Thank you very much. The work programme will come back to you every meeting. There is a list in the appendix of the standard items that are set onto the work plan. If there is anything that you want to remove from that, move up the agenda, move down the agenda. If there's anything you'd like added to it, I have noted, if you'll forgive me scrolling briefly through my notes, that you want to include additional information from CAFT and CIT on the types of right to buy fraud, on tenancy fraud, and on average cost and on specific costs per operation, which can all be part of the CAFT and CIT update. And you've asked for the benefits register of the Southwark 360 report, which can go into the next Southwark 360 report. You have asked also for more information about key milestones on the Southwark 360 updates, as well as key risks and mitigations. And you have asked to invite the Director of Adult Social Care to talk about the low effectiveness in 2 of the internal audit reports. When would you like to receive him? September, November?
I'll open to kind of input from the proposer of that.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it feels like September would be an ideal meeting given some of the November looks like a busier meeting, and February feels quite a long way from where we are now. So September would be good.
Okay, I think that's agreed by the committee.
I want to suggest something which used to be done by audit and governments, but I don't, which I don't know if people will be interested. I'm only on reserve on this committee, which is to have the strategic directors in rotation coming along and talking about the governments and also any issues related to this committee within their portfolios. So it was basically one strategic director once a year would come to a meeting, yeah. So because you would maybe having one anyway coming to the September one.
Can I suggest, since we have one coming to September, we take the opportunity to then decide at September whether to roll that forward? But
yeah, because I used to chair this meeting. It's just something that was done while I was chair a long time ago.
I do note that you've invited the Director of Adult Social Care rather than the Strategic Director of Children's and Adult Service. Are you happy with that for head of department rather than head of set? Can you just repeat that? Of course. What Councillor Hambass refers to is bringing chief officers who are the chief executive, any assistant chief executives, and the strategic directors. So everyone who reports directly to the chief executive. The person that you have invited specifically for next meeting is the Director of Adult Social Care, who is one step below that. So you'll get a divisional level rather than a departmental level, if you're happy with that.
Is there any harm in inviting them both to the next meeting?
Given the schedule, the risk is whether or not David Clerk-Thornton would be available for it, but if you want to extend the invitation, then we can definitely do that, subject to his availability. Clive?
Yeah, so I guess the specific request related to some audit concerns flagged in the papers, so why don't we ensure that those are responded to appropriately by the most appropriate group, individual set of officers, and then maybe as now we support the new sort of administrative 4-year cycle, I'll work with the chair alongside Tim and sort of other officers in terms of what a forward plan for this committee might look like going forward, picking up some of the suggestions and sort of putting that into a forward plan or a work plan for the committee that we could bring to you for discussion and work our way through. So we'll address the specific query next time, yeah, and then at the same time behind the scenes put a work plan forward for the chair to consider and consult with yourselves on how best we give you assurances going forward.
Is the committee content with that, John?
Just for clarity, is that what's the feedback mechanism there, Clive? Are you or is this committee going to provide a written update to us as members, and then still invite the relevant director to the next meeting?
Let's agree we'll have an item at the next meeting on the specific query that you raised, and that will be attended by the most appropriate officers to address that. And then separate to that, we'll pick up a wider piece of work around how we best support this committee going forward, the assurances you want. It will never be set in stone because things change over the course of time, but we'll put together a work plan that gives you the assurances that you feel you need as a committee, because obviously over the course of the summer we'll continue some of the training that I believe Tim started today, so that in a very respectful way, you better understand your roles. I acknowledge this is the first meeting and the such like, so sort of your understanding of the requirement will evolve and our understanding of what you need to satisfy the requirement will evolve as well.
Thank you for that. So there's quite a fair amount to be going on with, so that's good. I'm glad we've got a good kind of set of work to kind of proceed with. There's one thing that I think we should consider, which is the approach that the council is going to take to budget setting you know, the governance, the management risk, etc. around that. Particularly as I'm aware that the new administration is obviously intending to take a bit of a different, more participatory budgeting approach. And so I think bringing kind of that in for kind of review would be a good idea. Does the committee have any questions on that?
If you'll forgive me for interrupting, it's usually the Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
So to clarify, it's not the what they are going to do in the budget. It is the actual governance process, that the governance and process and risk management that they're actually going to go through is appropriate, which I would believe is in scope for audit governance and standards. So we won't be looking at budget proposals themselves. It will be, is this a effective way of you know, kind of process for achieving participatory budgeting, would be the proposal. However, I'm very much keen to take the, you know, kind of feedback and ensure that it is obviously at the right committee.
It feels like it might be difficult to do that in conjunction with the events itself, and maybe worth doing afterwards as a review of how it's gone for the first year, or is that something you specifically want to do alongside, and what would that look like?
So I think the aim is to ensure that we would get the right kind of you know, kind of confidence and assurance from this committee that this process is going, the process that the council is going to adopt, the administration is going to adopt, is going to achieve those ends, is going to be robust. I do think obviously there will be a role for lessons learned afterwards, but I would like us to, if we feel it's appropriate, kind of scrutinise the process before we've already kind of tried to use it, if you see what I mean. Any final comments or questions? Any comments and questions on that from the?
So on the September meeting, we've got a statement of accounts. This is my 5th year as a councillor, and since day one, I've kind of noted that we sometimes go into budget in quite detail, but we don't go into accounts, in my opinion, in great detail. What is available is quite top level, high level. So I just wanted to raise that as an issue and ask whether there's any scope for us being able to look at the accounts in more depth than we normally do.
Do you want to pick up on that?
I mean, if there's a way, I mean, I'm quite happy to run in sort of an informal session. You know, the statement of accounts is 325 pages, and you know, a lot of it is defined by some of the processes the external auditors already outlined, and it's difficult to firstly wade your way through, and secondly relate it to anything that the council does, so to speak, because it's so defined by accounting law. But we do ask you to approve it when we get to the September meeting, so I'd be quite happy to run a sort of informal session with the draft accounts to run you through it in a little bit more detail, that give you the opportunity to I guess dive into some of the detail that maybe in a formal committee we just don't have the time available to do, and you'll get yourself more familiar with it that way. Would that work, or that wasn't the question? Go on.
I'm fairly sure I looked at one of the 300-page documents once, but there was only like about a page of it which actually said how much was spent in each kind of division. It was very, very high level. You know, it wasn't a breakdown. Like in terms of like, so in year one of me as a councillor, we literally went through line by line of the budget. You know, we stopped doing it in that way over the years. Yeah, but for me, there isn't much point looking at a budget if we don't end at the end of the year look at what we actually spent and whether we did spend it on what we thought we were going to spend it or we didn't.
So if I may, I'd probably differentiate between the budget setting process and then how we deliver against that budget setting process, which is we said we'll spend £1 on that, we actually spent £1.50 on it or 25 pence on it, and the accounts are a sort of very formulaic formal document that I think to the lay observer very difficult to then reconcile back to what the council actually did. Yep, because it's so defined by SIFA processes and such like. And I think if I read the question right, we're sort of trying to merge in the accounts and the budgeting process, and I think it would be easier for all of us to try and keep them quite separate, because I don't think you'll be able to reconcile. So if you take the valuations, for example, that we had a conversation on today, we value our assets here for operational purposes. The accounts require us to value our assets in a very, very different way. So the value of our roads are totally meaningless to our budgets, if that makes sense. And very quickly we then get drawn into this very accounting-led conversation that doesn't really bear any relevance to the finances of the council or the financial health of the council. I'm not trying to avoid, I'm trying to help, honestly.
Also, is that more of a, you know, performance/scrutiny thing about how the, and I think it's very important that it is scrutinised, but we're here to do to look at the formal external audit of the accounts within that space. I think it is the scrutiny committees. Richard?
I was going to say that sounds like an OSC thing as opposed to how we budget, how we form the budget, which is here.
Which is what I'm suggesting, that, but as it is going to change for this budgeting round, that we do look at that in September and bring in the relevant team to explain those changes and give us confidence that that process and governance and risk management will be effective as we go through that governance process. And give us an opportunity to feedback on it.
I was just going to ask, do we feel that's enough time? Because if we sort of want to change things, how do they do that within the budget cycle if they're going to change processes?
I mean, timing is tight. Yeah, timing is tight.
Okay.
I think it's more to hopefully give everyone confidence that there aren't any major issues, and that if we do detect any, at least there's some opportunity to address those. But yeah.
What does timing is tight mean practically?
So we're still in public session, we are, aren't we?
Yes.
Okay, so the council will agree a time frame for setting its budget, leading up to the February Council Assembly next year. Within that, there is a will within the new joint administration to be far more engaging and I guess involve community more than it has. So I would imagine we'd have to do that during the autumn time if we're ready for to be ready for the formal budget setting as we get into Christmas time and into February. So I think we could bring a paper in September and then tweak things accordingly. If this committee wanted some quite fundamental changes to the approaches that we're taking with the executive, then that'll be a little bit more challenging to do. But I'd like to think that the work that Tim and myself will be doing to support you as a committee and the work that I do to support the executive means we shouldn't be a million miles away from each other as we sort of move through the end of the summer and the early part of the autumn.
And on that basis, to me, it sounds fine. Like, we'll look at what they've proposed in September, and if it satisfies us that the spirit of what they're trying to do is good enough, well enough reflected in the strategy, then we can sign off.
Yep.
I'm still not really clear. Like, I don't really care where it is, but you know, is there a possibility then within OSC that we get to see what the actual accounts were, what we spent? Like, because for me, it's lovely having a budget, right? We say we're gonna spend this on this and this and this and all the rest of it, but we get to the end of the year and we didn't spend anything on that, but we spent something else on that. Like, I'm interested in the reality, not in the theory, and I feel like we never see that reality.
Yeah, so there's an outturn report going to the, well, we're in now July executive, which will give you that headline of how did we perform against our original budget, with some narrative in there in terms of what the individual services are doing. That would then be an OSC role if they wanted to dive into that in a little bit more depth. I'm trying to differentiate between that process and the statement of accounts, which is a very different and separate document, and I don't think that will give you the was going to say satisfaction you were looking for. I don't think that was going to give you the detail you'd be looking for in terms of what we spent on and where, but I think the executive report this month in terms of the council's outturn on the last financial year's financial performance will be the starting point of any deeper dive you wanted to do around what did we spend what on.
But it's something you would kind of have to request as an extra rather than something that's done as a standard.
Well, I mean, we will do our own analysis as officers within the council, and obviously I hold colleagues to account around their own financial performance. That's for me, not for me to bring to these kind of committees, but that process happens, and I can give you some assurance on that. You'll have your own processes in terms of what happens at a more political level.
So I'm clear that that is an OSC responsibility or remit, not our committee's remit. Very sympathetic to it, but not something we can support from here. So I'm also very keen to complete my first meeting within time, which we still can do. So just want to bring it back and get final, hopefully, views, confirmation on adding that to the work plan for September, that we will ask for a report on the changes, etc., to the budgeting process that are going to be used, understand how that impacts governance and risk management through that, and give us therefore confidence that it's a robust process ahead of the completion of this budget cycle. Is the committee content? Thank you. Excellent. Do we have any other requests for the work plan at this stage? Okay, great. In which case I will, can we agree the proposed work plan? Is there anything else I should cover? No? Okay, great. So councillors, are we happy, content with the proposed work plan? Much appreciated. I don't believe, we've come to the end of the open agenda. I don't believe we have any closed business, and in which case, could you please, yes, that's the last agenda item for today. Thank you everyone. Very much appreciate your support. Good night.